Generally speaking, landscape painting has to do with the depiction of natural scenery. For the most part, there are two main traditions that address landscape painting: Western European painting and painting from the Far East, that is to say, China and Japan. The Western tradition of landscape painting is usually believed to have begun in the 1700s in the era known as the Romantic era. The Eastern tradition of landscape painting is usually thought to have begun around 600 to 900. And as many people know, the vertical format is a format used from the earliest periods to the present. In the Tang Dynasty, two major types of painting emerged. These were paintings done in monochrome and paintings done in blue-green or gold blue-green. In these paintings, the idea was not to reproduce exactly the appearance of nature, but rather to express an emotion and atmosphere so as to capture the rhythm and mood of nature. From the more philosophical point of view, Chinese painting, because of the inherent Chinese character, tended to show nature bigger than mankind. This expressed the basic philosophical stance of the Chinese mind. Nature was the big force. Humankind was the small force, and was always to be subservient to nature. It was towards the end of the Northern Song period, between the years 1000 and 1127, that the poet Su Shi and the scholar officials in his circle took up painting and brought something new. They approached painting with an objective of expressing themselves, of putting their own personal stamp on their paintings. From that time onward, the idea of getting one's own personal voice into the painting became important. During the Yuan dynasty from 1271 to 1368, the ruling Mongols distrusted the Chinese intelligentsia. They put restrictions on the scholars' opportunities at court. This caused many of the scholar artists to withdraw into seclusion, which created a heightened sense of class identity and individual purpose. This in turn inspired their art. The ideals of the retired scholars may be summed up as individuality of expression and brushwork more expressive of the inner spirit of the artists than outward appearance. The artist considered one of the greatest artists of the Japanese tradition was Sesshu Toyo. He was a Zen Buddhist priest. He was influenced strongly by Chinese painting. In the late 1400s, the Kano school came into prominence. The Kano school, or Kano style, was founded by Kano Masanobu. It tended to continue and develop the so-called hard edge or cutout style, which became an approach indicative of Japanese art. During the Azuchi Momoyama era, Asagawa is best known for his paintings on panels and for his folding screens. In the late 1700s and early 1800s, Katsushika Hokusai came to the fore, and he was to become one of the most consequential artists using landscape painting. Yet Hokusai didn't paint his images, he printed them. Another important artist of this era was Utagawa Hiroshige. Hiroshige is best known for his horizontal landscape series called The 53 Stations of the Tokaido, and for his vertical landscape series called 100 Famous Views of Edo. Most educated experts believe that Japanese painting has the most sophisticated use of composition of any paintings in the world. From the 1700s to the present, the Western tradition of landscape painting has been one of the strongest in art history, and one of the most diverse. When the Western tradition of landscape painting began, landscape was used primarily as the background for humans. Peter Bruegel was one of the few exceptions. In the late 1700s, John Constable was one of the first artists to stress the landscape aspect of his paintings. This painting, done in 1827 by J.M.W. Turner, was clearly about the landscape. In 1854, Eugene Delacroix made the landscape prominent in this luscious painting. In the early to mid-1800s, Camille Corot created landscapes that were filled with delicacy in both line and color. Also in the mid-1800s, Gustave Courbet featured landscape prominently. Yet it was in the late 1800s that landscape really blossomed. It happened with the emergence of a small group of artists called the Impressionists. In the Impressionists' paintings, color, brushstroke, and atmosphere figured prominently. The post-impressionists of the late 1800s, early 1900s changed the game a bit by stressing two-dimensionality, invented color, and lack of atmospheric light source. From 1905 to 1908, the Fauvists came to the fore, led by André Derain. In the 1910s and 20s, German Expressionism came into being, led by the artist Ernst Kirchner. From 1900 to the late 1900s, Modernism was an approach that explored abstraction and flatness in painting. In 1909, Georges Braque expressed landscape through Cubism. Wassily Kandinsky called the small moments of reality in his abstract paintings aromas of reality. Gabriele Munter was the first woman artist to be recognized in the 20th century as being on the same level as the men. Piet Mondrian brought landscape into abstract painting like no other artist. In the mid-1900s, Raoul Dufy often painted the landscapes around Paris. Also in the mid-1900s, Edward Hopper generally focused on urban landscapes, but did do a few non-urban landscapes. Yet in most instances, in his paintings, there were houses integrated with the landscapes. In the late 1940s and 50s, abstract expressionism drew artists' attention away from landscape painting and into paintings that were purely abstract and allowed the process of making the painting to show. Yet one artist at this time who did focus on landscapes was Andrew Wyeth. After the abstract expressionists in the 60s, pop art blossomed and kept most of the mainstream artists away from landscape painting. Yet one artist in particular, Wayne Thiebaud, did do some landscape paintings. After pop art, minimalism, op art, and color field dominated mainstream painting. Yet in the late 80s, landscape painting made a comeback through the auspices of David Hockney, a British painter. Around that same time, Anselm Kiefer, a German artist, was doing large-scale 10-foot paintings that were, in their own way, landscape painting. Around that same time, Gerhard Richter, another German artist, did some work with a landscape motif.